He was, I think he's planning on attending, but being here yet. We would like to get started. It's 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Good morning. This is Cannabis Committee meeting for Monday, January 15th at 8 a.m. We are in Coleman Conference Room. So, first order of matters, a roll call vote. So we have Vice Mayor Edmund Curley.
Present.
Councilmember Raymond Beltran.
Present.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open up for oral communications. This is the opportunity to address the Cannabis Committee scheduled matter unless additional time is authorized by the committee. All commentary should be limited to 3 minutes per individual and no more than 15 minutes total. Is there anybody from the community who would like to speak? Seeing nobody in the room on the committee, is there anybody online?
No.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and close oral communications. So today we have 3 scheduled matters on for the committee review. The first item is the review of proposed amendments to the cannabis dispensary ordinances, 1853 and 1854. There's a few different regulations looking in there, but specifically today, looking at land use regulations for retail cannabis locations. So currently, cannabis dispensaries are permitted in the downtown districts as well as airport industrial. The city is in receipt of communication from Mr. Darren Garrett. He is the owner of one of the licenses in our community, and he has requested that we expand the zoning to allow for him to relocate his business. Specifically, he has indicated to the west side of the community. He had proposed a location. The location is located off of Olive Avenue, and it has a zoning designation of general and service commercial. For today, we can speak on this specific location. I will let you know, I have informed Mr. Garrett that this location, in accordance with the ordinance as well as state law, is not in adherence to state laws. It is too close to a school. It's within 600 feet of a school. Nevertheless,
I'm a couple minutes late. Right out of here in just a second.
Nevertheless, the conversation, you wanted to extend it to being anywhere, looking more towards other zoning districts as well, looking at so we look at GC, general service commercial, but also open to other discussions. When the cannabis ordinance was first adopted, the council desired to have the locations to be on Main Street as well as airport industrial. So staff is available for questions. I do have the zoning map up on the screen showing the location, is specifically showing our general service commercial, which is typically on commercial corridors, specifically really concentrated on Olive Avenue.
I guess given past councils, kind of the area of Main Street and Airport, is that because you're going to get away from schools, you're not going to be near conflicting areas? Does that kind of help?
There was some of that, and there was a direction that a reinvestment in downtown, as there was some vacant buildings, things of that nature to drive the traffic that would be occurring from this to downtown.
Mr. Garrett just arrived. We're speaking about your request to possibly move, and Mr. Rittenhour had given some feedback about the location being near a school and stuff. Do you have anything else to add? We're on a public meeting, so the speakers here, so if you want to speak up, so we can hear this. Their feedback on, because that area is not, well, it's not allowable because of the school. Is there another area that you're looking at that we can look at?
Yeah, we're working on a second location. I mean, when I approached Jason about it, that was kind of our concern, was the school next door. But we didn't know if, that was an adult school. We just didn't know what the diameters of that was gonna be. I mean, when you look at the separation between that location and the adult school, I mean, it's a 20-foot block wall that separates that property, and then you have a 6-foot chain link fence that almost goes all the way out to the sidewalk of Olive Street. So it's there's a pretty good protective separation.
Well, it's not about visual, it's about physical.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Problem is we have a state law we gotta comply with.
So,
It's a local law.
So, and speaking to that, in my reference to being within 600 feet, I actually was not referencing the adult school,
Yeah.
even though that would be a concern. The actual, is the school on Putnam. Here, this is the distance as you measure from, property to property. It's approximately 425 feet. So that was the actual conflict that I was
Yeah.
noting.
Can I comment on that real quick? Where you place where the building's at, and then you go back, that's a huge lot we're
I
talking
know that it
about.
goes from the site, the state law, we checked that.
Is there any way we could,
Parcel it out or something.
parcel it out 200 feet back? I mean,
Oh, the actual business has room to move?
Like separate, he's talking about separating the
Right.
lot, so that way it moves it up 200 feet.
I don't know.
But that's still be in conflict with the adult school though, even though it's, so in the adult school, it's not just 18 and over, sometimes there's kids that are 17. I don't know if that has to do with even what Porterville Unified might plan for the property later on, because I know some sites have a preschool, even though it might be designated as another type of school. USD is constantly in fluctuation of where they move sites to, especially pre-K is a big part of their growth over the last probably 10 years. So I don't know if that would be an issue. I guess that's another talking to PUSD as far as what their potentials are for that property.
Councilmember, I did reach out to PUSD informing them of this meeting and requested feedback. I spoke briefly with Dr. Robach. He provided me, on the phone that there was some concern, but he would be getting me a response from them and Dr. Nelson. The ordinance as the city has adopted currently states any K through 12 school or planned school. And so that gets to your concern. We would have to run that to ground with PUSD on that. As Mr. Garrett is correct, it does allow for, if we just measure,
Yeah.
let me.
And that tracks, by the way, with the state requirement. The state requirement, I believe, is K through 12.
Correct.
daycares and youth centers.
So
But if it serves as a youth center, we're gonna have issues. I don't know.
yeah, that's what I was getting to. I work for PUSD, so I know some of that sites that I've been with the schools for 29 years, sites that were, oh, this is what it's gonna be. 5, 10 years later, it's something else. And so that's why I'm just looking at the potential of if PSD has a plan in the next 5 years that we're not aware of. If they don't have a plan, then that gets into that area. Well, that's a potential for you. But I'd like to get feedback from USD since they're already established. To see what so it seems like we'll get some feedback on that.
Then that site has changed 3 times and
Oh, has it?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Where did it change?
it used to be Sierra Vista High School. It used to be a high school. And then they changed it to adult school, so they could change it to another.
I guess that goes to the preschool part, even though the adult school, they like to have a lot of young parents, high school age or,
If they run a
19.
daycare there, that's
They
good.
put a daycare there, so adults can go to school, the parent can go to school, and then they're on. I've seen that other site, that's why I'm like,
Does it have a daycare currently?
that I'm aware of, no, it does not. But it's kind of similar, it's a long, big lot where there's potential for them to grow, and I've seen that at other sites. So.
But as of right now, it's K-12 we're planning. So
Right.
if we put it in here and then they do something else, it's already in there then. So what
You're saying we could preclude the school from putting.
no, I'm saying that if the policy says K-12 are planned in that state and you're complying with it, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Not the potentials. And we have to get that response from school. We need it in writing too.
Is there ability, so assuming that it's not, and they don't have plans, just hypothetically speaking. So is there room to move the business to avoid the other school that is actually there?
I do a theoretical measurement from, I guess if we have to do a setback, so I imagine maybe these two buildings would be here. So if I go there.
Just because if that's an
we're
issue, you
about
can't do it, then it
550
precludes that.
feet. We're about 550 feet, so
Oh,
it would need to be 600 feet or greater. So that would have to be evaluated to see what,
yeah.
if there was a
Yeah, that's
parcel
kind of
map
like the
done.
first question, right? Just because if that's not gonna be doable, then the other site's not even really, it's kind of a moot point.
Correct, because I would, right here, you saw my measurement is to the rear of the building that's further set back. There could be, another parcel map designation, different shape, creating essentially a flag lot there. Let's do a theoretical measurement. There, so you have. So
There
if
we
you,
go.
there, you can get, but again, this is looking at a map that will need to be further evaluated. As well as I know Mr. Garrett has expressed an interest in potentially having a drive-through here, similar to what you see in Tulare. So that would need to be,
More space.
that would require more space.
Yeah.
Just provide some feedback, they do not have a daycare facility.
Okay.
And generally, most of their students are all 18 and over. I think, the 17 goes to Butterfield. And Butterfield serves as a transition between the adult school and the high schools. This is.
Based on age.
Yeah,
Okay.
release the information right now.
So it really becomes a I mean, it looks like it could be a question of just, can we get the 600 feet buffer between the other site then?
And so, and I've requested the comments in writing from PUSD. Just haven't, I
Yeah.
notified them of our meeting. And I requested I received them before the meeting. They have not received them.
Okay.
So
So the purple zones, so I understand this a little bit better. The purple zones are the ones that are commercial, although
Yes.
they're all on Main Street today. It's part of the discussion today to talk about the potential of opening that up.
correct. And so how this could be facilitated, if the committee would like, and ultimately the council, would be to amend the zoning ordinance to also permit retail cannabis dispensaries in general and service commercial zoning districts. So that would entail that everything that we see in purple throughout the community would be a potential location. And so here, let me decrease transparency to make it easier to see. Everything that we see in purple would then be a location that could be allowed. Now, with cannabis dispensaries, it is required that they enter into a development agreement. So ultimately, the city council has the authority to discretionarily approve or not approve a location for cannabis dispensaries.
Mhm.
So that is an extra layer of protection that the council has. But generally speaking, when people would evaluate a site for a cannabis dispensary.
Well, we also have our population restrictions, so it's not like.
Right, so we're currently,
Yeah.
as the ordinance is maxed out at 3.
So, Mr. Garrett, if I could, when you were applying for this license and through the state, I know it was a long, rigorous process, especially financially. Knowing that it was restricted to Main Street and doing all the development on the Main Street building, and now you want to move locations, what is the purpose of moving after all that investment and time in that location?
Well, I mean, you have 3 cannabis shops that are within 1 block of each other. I mean, we're all within, you know, a block or 2 of each other.
But you need that going in.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just what's the, yeah, so just,
Well, the purpose is to, number one, I mean, I feel like that we're losing a lot of, which I know because I get a lot of feedback from people that live on that side of town that are still using illegal cannabis deliveries to come into Porterville. Because not a lot of people that live on that side of town are gonna get up and drive down and try to find parking on Main Street and then to walk into a cannabis club.
do you or the other dispensaries do delivery?
No,
None of them do delivery?
I think, no, it doesn't. They don't?
They allow it.
It's allowed.
It's a lot.
You allow-
I believe, in speaking with the other, I think they were entertaining it. Some of the, costs of operating a delivery, I think has prohibited, I think it's similar to other businesses, that it becomes.
You need staff
Yes.
to do that.
it costs a lot to operate a delivery service.
Staff, insurance, car, I mean, there's a lot to it. It just, the margins don't make sense for us to,
So the outside dispensaries that are providing that service for people in our city, where are they coming from? How far are they coming from?
They're illegal.
they're not illegal. They're
Oh.
they're independent,
That's
basically
all they
delivery,
do.
right, that's all they do
Like
is
Uber
delivery.
Eats or something kind of a thing. That's all they
Exactly,
do.
yeah,
Okay.
and so they will go and pick up from, Tulare, Farmersville, Lindsay.
So do you know in our city regulations, we allow dispensaries for sale in our community? Do we allow outside that we don't collect taxes? They're not regulated by the city to then do that in our community?
So we can't prohibit the deliveries from outside.
But we could tax it.
Mhm.
Hey, Jake, in looking at downtown, I know that originally, and I'm new to the community, so great to be here. I think when we set this up for downtown is to, give some economic advantage to downtown. But as far as safety and security, and have you had any issues with them being downtown?
No.
So it's just like any other.
We've had some random ones since the businesses have opened up, but it's not a consistent issue with any of the businesses. We haven't had any issues. We've had a couple, we had a recent theft at one of them that they're still investigating, but any concerns from the PD's aspect, I think all the businesses have been operating within the law and we haven't had any issues. And I had conversations with the fire chief who does the code enforcement part of it. So I'm not going to speak for Brian, but we've had conversation. I don't think they've had any major issues either. There's some compliance issues here and there, but.
So is it fair to say that this is now a legitimate business? It's operating in good standing. And so there really is nothing barring us from opening this up to be anywhere in these areas, right?
From my perspective, no.
And I think in the interest of economic development, and now we've got through some lessons learned and things like that, I think I would certainly want to consider that as a member of the committee because I personally don't think it should be down on Main Street. And I think we should give them an opportunity to get off Main Street because Main Street is the identity of our community and I'd like it to be more centered around family and those types of things. Not that is it becoming more acceptable that this is a family-oriented thing, but being old school, I don't think it is. We can debate that, but I think in the interest of economic development and the track record that we should consider this within all of the rules, of course. But I think that it's important for this business to be a little bit less constrained now that they're proven.
I believe August.
Yeah, I think that's comments I made in our meeting where I didn't like when you have our parades or certain festivities, and I thought there was a concentration of that type of work. Even if it was all bars, it's kind of a thing you don't like to socially at least to have out there. Not that it's could be a bad thing you guys are running, obviously, and with the chief speaking there. since I've been on the committee in the start of all this, there have been basically no issues as far as, crimes or anything like that, so, my sentiment's the same. If we're gonna expand this, we have to look at all the potentials, but as long as it's within legal parameters, the door's open for that discussion, and looks like we'll get feedback from QSD, and if it's not this site, there's another potential site, we'll definitely kick it around like this, and if it's in within the regulations, I don't have a concern either.
So, you know, what I'm hearing from the committee, as direction, and please correct me if I'm wrong, staff can work with Mr. Garrett, looking at what he may want to propose, to split that lot, if that's the desired location, as well as looking at other properties within, general and service commercial, or potentially other zoning districts, if need be, to expand the use of retail cannabis dispensaries in the community. As well as I will follow up with PUSD and get formal comments, about the potential location. So we will look at what that, parcel map could look like. Have Mr. Garrett propose, a draft parcel map, have it reviewed, surface level, and make sure that it would meet setback requirements, things of that nature, not a formal process, as an effort to help this process. And then we could also work with PUSD to look at that. And then bring an item back to the committee at a future date, for those additional considerations.
Sounds good?
So the next item is also, an item that was, requested by Mr. Darren Garrett. This is revolving in regard to security on site. In the development agreement, there's a provision, in regard to security. If you look at page 7 of the development agreement, states that owner shall employ properly trained and licensed third-party security personnel to protect the welfare and safety of owner and employees and to ensure public safety to the neighboring community. Owner shall use security personnel during all hours of business operations. Security personnel may be armed so long as proper licensing and insurance requirements are followed and met by a third-party operator, third-party operating, providing such security services. I've asked Chief Costello to provide some input on this item in regards to state requirements.
Yeah, so when it comes to security, there's a lot to digest, especially for our local shops, private security in general. So, first and foremost, for the businesses, I know one is here. The state of California Security Investigation Services website, and I have the website here, but also have some handouts, and I'm going to give you a lot of information to take too, so you can go over it, because it is a lot to digest, and I know you guys have worked through this with providing security, but looking at different alternatives in your own. BSIS at dca.ca.gov is the site where you're going to get tons of information regarding security and security requirements for marijuana dispensaries. They do require 100% compliance, which falls under the business and profession code when it relates to security guards and what the state's commercial cannabis regulations and requirements are. And I'm going to give some examples under these sections of DCC. For example, the employer, one or more unmarked individuals wearing distinct uniforms that interact with the public is a requirement. Employees that are under the employer cannot subcontract out their services. Apply and receive authorization from BSIS, which is who regulates it through the state of California. Comply with the training required by BSIS. Obtain a security guard card and be 21 years or older. That's just the requirements. A few of the examples by the employer. Security guards themselves fall under proprietary private service officers through the state too, and have to follow many regulations also. And I'll give some examples. And don't try to take notes on all this. I got some handouts that will be able. I'm just going through some examples just for the group, the committee, and the information provided to the public if anybody's listening. So they can't be armed with any type of weapon. Obviously, need to wear a distinct uniform. Likely interact with the public while they're performing their duties, pass a DOJ and FBI criminal history check, be 21 years of older, pursuant to the Department of Cannabis Control regulations, receive authorization by BSIS and possess their PPSO registration card, which is the private security card. And then if you elect to contract services out, obviously there's regulations that fall under BIS also, which is the state. I have a contact with state cannabis control. He's a special agent there. I've discussed some of our local shops and regulations and some of the things that I've seen. We just discussed it, but we haven't had any issues there. And I know they don't have any issues because we're mandatory to report any issues to cannabis control in this unit. So saying all that, there's a lot of regulations that cover security requirements for the local businesses that are opting to manage these type of businesses. And Department of Cannabis Control has all the regulations, including the security requirements online. It's like 234 pages, and I've read it. So it takes a lot of time. So we're not going to do that here today. But I have all the information and links that if an employer wants to provide his own security, what steps and costs and requirements they would have to go through to do that. These were just some examples, but this information that I have for the public today would provide them in the right direction for these steps if they were going to employ their own employees to provide their own security. I'm happy to try to answer any questions for the committee.
So in regards to the ordinance and the development agreement, what would be required from the council? Should there be a desire to allow for the retail cannabis dispensaries to not utilize third-party security, but have their own security? Essentially, we need to adopt an ordinance and in that development agreement outline that security be provided in accordance with state law and regulations as purchased.
Well, make sure I understand this. So the segment that you read, it says security personnel may be armed so long as proper licensing and insurance requirements are followed and met by a third-party operator providing such security. We're saying it would be beyond third party?
So the request is that to not utilize a third party, to have the staff of the cannabis business providing that security.
Which we can do, provided what Jake said, that they're completely properly licensed and operating requirements.
Okay, makes sense. I just want to make sure I understand what we're talking about. And it sounds like there's an awful lot that someone would have to go through to do that, but I would not be opposed to it if they met all of those requirements. I think it would be okay if we would adopt those, the language that would accept that based on what the police chief had recommended and based on his experience and what he just talked to us about. That's my opinion.
Yeah, okay, and the feedback from the other dispensaries, and given what the chief has spoken to as far as lack of crime or anything like that, it didn't seem like a need. I know when the dispensaries first started up, there was a concern of theft, robberies, criminal activity. It doesn't seem like we have that.
I would imagine they're probably susceptible to it, just like regular pharmacies are,
Yeah.
which they are. They have a higher risk in general, but
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is definitely a potential. That you're not the only dispensary that's asked or required about that. That's been a discussion previously, so we'll take it up.
Thank you.
And just to add, there's just, like I just said to you, there's very specific steps, and as long as you follow those steps, I think you're legal and lawful in doing it, as long as you're following the security guard registration fact sheet that I gave you and those links, that you do the research to make sure that it is in compliance with local and state laws.
So, and as the Councilman Beltran mentioned, I think this is a cost that's being incurred for this third-party security across all of the retail dispensaries. So I would imagine that they would all
There's
request.
probably support for this amongst all of them.
Correct. And so what would it be is, so each development agreement is adopted by a separate ordinance. And so if we were to move forward, more than likely, there would be an ordinance that moved forward for each of the dispensaries, that would be requesting change.
You can take them all at once, though.
Any other comments or questions in regards to this?
Just a thought, and I don't want to jinx or anything, but I know the dispensaries being downtown on Main Street location, given PD's physical location is so close, it provides the density, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of personnel, especially given your hours of operation. Given that potential to move out to the west side of town, or maybe a not so visible area, all of it's pretty busy. There's just a little concern that because of given our Tulare County sheriffs dealing with a lot of thefts and the outlying gas stations and stuff, I would have a concern for your business in an area the further it gets from the heart of town.
Right. That was originally the council.
The concern, because I see it from the Tulare County sheriffs all the time. There's a quick getaway out of all it, to get out away from the area. So just a concern for your business. I don't want to jinx it. I'm just worried about that.
And I had that, a little bit of that concern too, when I went and visited, Oakland Farms, Valley Pier,
Out there.
all of their locations, even the ones that are, in Tulare.
The less visible
They're
ones.
99, yeah, they're quite a ways from the local police department.
I'm not
And they haven't had any.
far down the road, but I visited your dispensary, your shop, Friday. And, yours is unique in that everything is locked up. Nothing,
Same.
the other places is a little more hands-on, a little more accessibility. So if you have that same business model at your other location, I can see where you're gonna limit that potential of temptation, I guess.
Yeah,
To the way you are established.
it'll be set up.
Yeah, so it's very secured, so, yeah.
We're adding layers of security to our.
Yeah, I love the way that looks. So you guys are doing a great job with that.
That was one of our main things, safety for the employees. Take on the book. Try to.
Double doors, and it's a great security look, yeah, and feel.
So originally when the council, because I know that there was a long break between like when we adopted the regulate the ordinance itself, the ordinance allowed for it, and set the number and all that in the location. And then when we actually had the applications, and I think the point of what the council was doing way back then was that they thought they were looking, that's part of the reason why they all ended up on Main Street initially, because there was this concern that we wanted visibility. Like if there's a light shining on it, they're going to be better actors. So the only reason why I bring that up is that if we're going to, because we are, and I get it, I mean, it is, we figured it's going as good as we ever thought it could, right? Which is great when that happens, because we haven't had issues. They've been operating in compliance. I mean, they're not, I don't think they've been an eyesore or detriment to the community. They've been really good partners with the city. So all those things were great. So now we're looking at expanding, but we just got to keep in mind what that original thought was and just kind of be aware of those concerns, because it's possible that by sending it out, we will start to have not so much on their own behavior, but now on others being able to take advantage of the fact that they're not as, visible.
Yeah, there's,
And that can be an issue.
positives and concerns with less visibility.
When I read through this, there's a lot of language in there about security. And so if we do expand this out and we do have this portion that we said we were going to add the language to, we would add something to that.
Yeah,
effect.
oh yeah, that's exactly it. We're gonna kind of want to, when we make these amendments, we're gonna want to kind of keep that in mind, exactly it.
And
I agree.
essentially, as you look at the security plan, of each of the development agreements, which are all similar, so in these aspects, they're all the same. It really relies upon the police chief's review and approval of a security plan. And that was the council's direction at the time, and it's been looking that if there is something minor within the security plan that they see.
Or project specific concerns.
The police chief has been able to review those and make recommendations.
Well, I mean, when they came and did the smash and grab at the boot barn, they had to do some additional stuff. So it's not just this situation.
yeah.
It's a focal area, but everybody's going to be impacted by that.
Well, thank you all for that direction. The next item is review of the community benefits program. So in each of the development agreements, there is established a funding source for the community benefit fund. And on the screen, you can see, and I also have handouts if you'd like to see it. I have it in Excel form, so it can be a live document. So there is a base rate of $30,000 per license holder. We currently have 3 licenses active, and so a minimum annual revenue of $90,000. We have a current fund balance of over $141,000 in the fund. So I have a description of what's included in the development agreements for the community benefit program. And so it is to include, could include such items as senior citizen programs, beautification efforts, funding for enforcement against illegal cannabis operations, public safety, housing programs, economic development, infrastructure, capital improvement, including expansion of existing facilities, as well as support for holiday and special community events, also in support for local public service, public safety, and special social and community organizations. At prior cannabis committee meetings, the committee provided direction of categories that the committee would like to recommend to the council for funding, as well as percentages. And I'll have those listed here. As we see, we have nonprofit grants was recommended at 40%. And this is something that would be recommended if the committee so chose to the council for consideration, and then could be amended annually or on an ad hoc basis as requested or required. Also, funding for homelessness would be smart team resources and vouchers. The discussion there was we provide additional funding through this for the smart team to provide vouchers for rapid rehousing or other services that individuals experiencing homelessness may be facing that would support community safety, as well as having the smart team work with the navigation center on some of those vouchers as well. And that would be hotel vouchers for short stay, as well as other vouchers, transportation or such that may be needed as a smart team works through that. As well as there was a recommendation for economic development, business assistance. And so looking at, there was an emphasis at that time on downtown and beautification, maybe looking at if individuals needed some sort of assistance, a grant to assist with signage, as there is continuously compliance concerns with signage. We get a lot of reports from the community about signage, as well as overall awning repair, things of that nature. Ours also, sometimes we have concerns of small businesses needing equipment replacement, things of that nature, albeit HVAC equipment or something similar. So with the current amount of funding that we have, we're looking at $141,356. You would see the breakdown here. I've also provided the committee members with some draft program language This was presented to a committee prior and includes, their, their direction, in that. And so available to go through those. It's broken down into two categories. There is nonprofit grant program. And so the committee was interested in providing grants up to $5,000 to nonprofits in the community. There's always a need in that section of our community. As you can see, eligible applicants includes ongoing nonprofit organizations operated in the city of Porterville and good standing. And then there's an additional as looking at the nonprofits of how frequently they could receive the grant. And so we did have some discussion that because it is up to $5,000 and the funds are limited, that the potential is if an entity receives a grant of $2,500 or greater, that they would not be eligible for a certain amount of years. We did not establish the years. Some of the conversation that was going around was 3 years or 5 years, but there was not, did not land on a specific number. So we could discuss that today as well. So that's, and you can see the idea was to have it be a simple program that would be adopted by resolution, that the grant application also serves as the requirements for that to try to streamline and bring assistance to those, as well as looking at the application process being simply, and then the recommendation was to have it, have a lottery be performed similarly to how the fireworks stands are approved, and then a final approval of consideration before the first of the staff's available for any questions.
Well, Vice Member Kirby, I was, past council member, Mr. Wyrock and I were kind of shooting this around. And so I don't know if those percentages or those categories, if they have any feedback on kind of what our thoughts were as far as trying to break up the percentages of what would go to and kind of identify. Now, this is always fluid because, we could change this over time next year. We don't know how many people will get in the applications year 1 versus year 5. But that was the idea of.
I like it. I do. I like the spread because we're going to use it for things that we need, but we're also going to open it up for everybody. This thing is so broad in the introduction. I mean, that there's going to be a lot more demand than there is going to be money.
Mm-hmm.
But the lottery will help us to level that out and continue to review it as we go, because, if we can focus this on nonprofits and some things that we need, specific to the city and specific to economic development, I think this is right on target. I like it.
Specific to, if somebody gets let's say $5,000 grant, given, let's say we have, multiple applicants, that if somebody got a $5,000 grant this year, they would be excluded, say, a couple of years to give the other nonprofits opportunities versus they get it 2 or 3 years in a row.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that criteria develops, so we don't get a lot of double dip, triple dip.
That's what the concern
Triple
is.
dip stuff.
And we don't know how many the first year we might have enough applicants to spend it all, but.
Why don't we put some language in here that says that we need to review this annually so that we can review it in a way that, so as the trajectory unfolds, then we can adjust to that trajectory, whatever that is. That's what I would recommend.
Is there a specific number of years you would like to start with? Do you want to start with 3 years? I know that was, so the two terms that were tossed around or discussed prior was 3 years and 5 years. Or would you like to, we could exclude that sentence altogether and then look at adding a criteria after we go through a funding cycle to amend the program?
I think it's problematic to put a limit on it if it's going to be for economic development. But, like you said, I think if we have a renewal process every year, where we review it and either continue it or modify it, and then we keep it at the way that you've represented it here, I think it will be safe, but we'll have to review it every year. And I noticed that the contracts for the Cannabis Committee have to be renewed every year anyway, so let's make it part of that review.
Yes, we could. So So the cannabis license renewals go through, so 45 days, and it's 45 days prior to the end of the year. Cannabis license holders are, they request that they want to, renew their license. So we have a simple renewal form that each cannabis license holder completes with the key personnel. Essentially, it's stating that the operation is continuing as it was prior. It then goes to the chief's office for review to ensure that there hasn't been any illegal activity that has occurred throughout the year. And then those are renewed. Those renewals do not go to the council as it is laid out in the ordinance of how this goes. So it's an administrative process.
But the timing of it, I think.
Right, so we
goes
could
pretty
renew
well,
it,
right?
yeah, so we could have something on here that every January, this is renewed.
Mhm.
If
And
that-
review.
Yeah, and reviewed, so that would be to see if there's any changes.
What do you think?
I like it. I like it.
So what I will do, and that's it, if everybody's comfortable with the language on the nonprofit grant program, I will strike the last sentence of eligible applicants.
Yeah, okay.
And so that would then just be struck from that. And as we prepare to bring in items before the city council for consideration.
Yeah, I'm looking to see how many applicants come in.
Yeah, but I imagine I
Might be
believe that
flooded.
I believe that there is several, nonprofits in the community that are aware to this.
They're aware of it.
And this also,
I think they're waiting for us to go down with the meeting so they can submit their application.
I believe they would. And so and how the process is envisioned is that the community development department would screen initially, and then we would have a meeting of the cannabis committee to then have final determination of if these are that the applications received meet the minimum criteria. But essentially you see the minimum criteria in there.
And the amount is gonna be based on that same annual review. I believe we should set that because
Correct.
that
And
puts
so
the limit on how much money is
the-
available.
The percentages can change. We could evaluate that every January as well. See if there's a need in another category or the committee and council would like to specifically call something out in particular that they would like to fund.
I like it because it's economics driven, right? Incentive driven, and everyone's gonna rush to do it in the first part of the year until the money's gone, and then they put the money to work. So I think it's a good idea.
And so I know we've had conversations in the past about additional like downtown decorations and things of that nature. That was also included so in future years, if that wants to be added to this as well, that could be.
Well, So you need to add some sort of a discretionary category here.
So these are all they're essentially all discretionary. But in conversation, I've heard at council meetings that there is a desire to acquire additional decorations for a holiday, and that is called out that was called out in the development agreement. Support for holiday, yes, and so I
So
just.
it's there.
It's there,
Okay.
so it's encompassed in it. There wasn't a direction to fund that with the
Okay.
first year. Okay.
That makes sense. And it looks like we're doing okay, right? So first year was the first year 90,000 and now we're 140 or?
So the first year was a little bit less, as it was time. So the first year was like the minimum, and then we had additional licenses come on board. So I envisioned we have 1/4 of this year has been received. So should be receiving the second quarter here in the next week or two, hopefully, the next couple of weeks. If not, we'll be contacting the business owners and informing them they need to be submitting that. They have 30 days from the end, so typically we receive those by the end of January. So we are on track, and looking at where we've scaled up, And then now we have 3 licenses. And so what we're seeing on the cannabis revenues is we expect this year to be very similar to last year. in that.
So that timing also being the end of January is probably a good economic jump off
Correct.
point.
So one of the considerations that I would think possibly as we look at now that now I just mentioned the timing of the January, maybe this is something that the committee reviews in February, maybe near the end of February. That way we can have all those revenues. So what I'll do here is because we base it off percentage. And so we will increase this bottom line and then it will be dispersed through the percentages. So you'll see a more than likely a larger number here throughout these because we'll have those. That many more. So they pay on quota business.
Makes sense to me.
Now looking at the small business grant program, as you can see, structured very similarly to the nonprofit, which is essentially there was originally some desire to have this be focused on downtown. This application is citywide. So everybody's aware that was, but we had discussions on both in the direction of citywide. As you can see, there's not a great amount of funding there. It's about $28,000. And so it's up to $5,000. There's no income requirement on this. This is different than our other grant programs that are provided with HUD funding. They're income driven. This is driven by more applicants that are for-profit businesses that have an application.
Could we put a cap on it so it targets the people that need it the most?
We can, so we could have it be similarly to the HUD, where it could be 80% of the income level for the county. So that could be for low and moderate income persons. I mind you that we already have funding sources for that. The desire was for businesses, essentially the original vision was businesses that were downtown that may need a hand up to help get to that next level, or they're experiencing something to support that and not necessarily be driven by their income. But if that's the desire.
I just want to discuss this, and Ray, maybe we could talk about it a little bit. We don't want someone who makes a lot of money to be getting these funds.
Well, I think it's here applying for this.
Right.
So
There has to be some limit on this that we should set. I don't know if it's the HUD limit.
That was discussions we had, yeah. So we want it broad enough to help as many as possible, but also structured.
What we could do as well is use the provisions in the government code for it to be categorized as a small business.
Right.
I like that idea because, you know, if 3 out of 4 of our jobs are coming from the entrepreneurs and the small businesses, that's more important than their income level to me in spirit.
Right. And candidly, at the $5,000 grant mark, majority of larger businesses won't want to fill out the paperwork for that. We have that on some of our other programs.
Yeah, it's built in,
Cities.
So that is, and you can see here, the application process, again, approval is through the city council. The vision on streamlining this would be, again, that it would go to staff level review to make sure the minimum requirements are met, have a committee meeting, to then have recommendation to the council and have all go before the council at one time for consideration. So in that, looking at encapsulating, I guess I should say this, I think for best practices, we could encapsulate a time frame to which the grants are open. That way there's an open and close and not a running grant period. That would provide us feedback on the committee level of how much the need is for each funding category.
I like that too, and probably the timing of that, Ray, in my opinion, should be sometime in the March, April, 60, 90 days after we make all of these
February review, we know what the funding amount is.
Because we want the money to go to work, and so we want people to know there's a limit, and if they don't use the money, then we'll carry it over and use it for other things.
Yeah, I think the 90-day open window would be good. It gives time to market the program and as well as to answer questions, if somebody is going through the process. As you can see, the application is intended to be very simple, but not everybody is as familiar with completing these types of forms.
You just gotta spell it out, there's a deadline.
Correct.
And we have to process it well, quickly, so that we don't have any issues with people saying, hey, I was 10 minutes late, or whatever.
Right, and so without that, if the committee is good with the language on the small business grant program, what I will do is on the eligible applicants, given the direction, I could add a sentence in there that spells out eligible applicants would fall within the definition of a small business, and we would provide that definition from the state.
I concur, I think that's good.
With that, that was the final scheduled matter that we have this morning. Now we're into other matters. If any community member would like to bring up anything in other matters or have a future item that you would like the staff to bring back.
I'm good as is until we get feedback on security and some of those other zoning.
I just have one question, maybe you guys could look into it, but as a business owner, I may not operate all throughout California, my roofing company. And every town I go into, I have to get a business license in order to do business in that town. So wouldn't it be fair that anybody that's doing, delivering cannabis in Porterville would have to obtain a business license in Porterville to be able to do that or not?
This is a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
We've discussed it before where, I don't know if the state
can-
law regulates.
Yeah, I'll go back and look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just-
It's a concern. You're not the only one. that's
It's a
brought it up.
pain. I remember we went through it before. It's just, it's really hard to monitor it, but we can try.
It's
It is.
still an emerging thing,
Yeah.
right? So now we're
Well,
starting
we
to see
we
where it
just
goes.
prohibited it initially, and then the state said, can't do that.
Yeah,
And
so
so,
we'll look at other jurisdictions, how they're able to.
we'll look at it.
I would really like to propose in other matters that we look at taxing it once we identify it, because if we have to do it, let's tax it and let's
Right.
make it a license, and it'll feed this fund too.
Yeah, well, the thing is, yeah, we don't want to create an economic hardship for businesses, but if they're not a local.
Yeah, focus on local. I
They're
totally
taking
agree.
away
I was just
from.
using-
Well, and the locals are already paying tax. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right,
So
regulated.
I'm all
Makes it
for it. If we
unfair
can-
to
If we can make it happen, I'm all for it.
I just know from.
We support your feelings on that. I believe you support it.
Visalia, is that what they did? They adopted something. Now, whether, I don't know how they're enforcing it, but they've adopted
They
something.
have, and one of the issues, and Mr. Garrett brought it up, that is being seen across the state is you have illegal operations, delivery operations, and essentially they continuously move locations. They're web-based. What we know is they have an operation that is essentially a warehouse delivery. I don't mean no store equipment. And they move from location to location to evade the law because they're licensed.
So, but applying that, and I might ask Darren, does that mean that if someone delivering to your location would be subject to that tax then, right?
No, because we deal with state regulated vendors. I'm talking about like outside sources that are delivering cannabis into Porterville that are legal. You know, but legal from
Okay,
other towns.
they're in
If they're
another.
coming into
Have
Porterville,
distributors.
Yeah.
doesn't they have to have
It's a little bit different. I
Yeah,
understand.
so
kind of a business license and pay taxes to the city of Porterville?
Distributors have to
Yeah,
have-
we would define it as a retail delivery. So similarly to somebody who has a catering license, also have a business license to cater an event in the city.
It's kind of food trucks. problem.
Yeah,
They come to the city limits or within the city to try and do sales and then they're not licensed here.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, I mean, we pay $15,000 a year to be licensed, so.
No, we, yeah, we feel the same.
But I believe Ms. Lou was reviewing that or.
yeah, we'll look at that. And we have a couple of things actually. We have some other housekeeping things like the hours of operation. There's some cleanup that we want to do in our ordinance to allow, because there was, again, with the good partners that everybody's being, there's not this concern there was on the restriction of the hours so much. So I think we want to open that up. So within what is allowed by California law.
Question I would ask, to just follow up to what Julia's saying is, would we have different hours for a drive-through versus a building?
And.
That
it's
might
state.
might need, it's state law. Well, I saw that.
Well, we can be more restricted. So we're allowed to be more restrictive than the state law. Right now, we are more restrictive than the state law in general with regard to the hours of operation. So we could open it up. What I would recommend is we, again, there was this concern back when we did this, where we didn't want to give ourselves too much flexibility. Now that we know that that it's working well, we'd like to have that flexibility. So we've got to go back and add that flexibility back into the ordinance. And I think that's an area. And then once we put the flexibility in, we'll still write it in a way that allows the council to look at specific circumstances objectively, obviously, but and then they can apply, different if you want to look at different rules for drive-throughs versus ones that are just,
And we just did that for times of a business, right? So we looked at from a law enforcement aspect and then presented the information to the city manager and council to adjust the hours on a business that wanted to open earlier, and how does that affect law enforcement, the times. And we actually were more restrictive, but the state law said that we could operate within these hours, looked at the calls for service, made sure that there wasn't any issues during that time. I mean, opening earlier in the morning than staying up open later is more of a concern for us than the morning hours, and council made those adjustments. So I mean.
So we will have a meeting scheduled in the future. We will let everybody know. We will continue the items. We will look at the zoning ordinance and work with Mr. Garrett on that, as well as we will. I believe that so the chief will work, and so staff with Mr. Garrett on some of the item 2 to look at this development agreement, to look to bring that back to the committee. Then we'll have a recommendation to council on the community benefits program. What staff will do is timing wise, we will wait to get the last quarter's funding in. We will then draft an item to go before the city council, indicating the committee's recommendation for the operation of that fund with the nonprofit and small business with those funding percentages, and the applications to be adopted by resolution to then release that to the public.
Great summary.
Thank you, everybody, for their time. Appreciate it. Thank you.